Okay, so I believe that Mark and Tony are both unavailable today. Not sure about Armand. We do have Amanda here as our alternate, so she could serve to give us a quorum if Armand is not present. Let me see if he's logged in. Nope, not yet. Well, in the interest of time, we could go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
Well, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. I'll do a quick roll call and then turn it over to our chairman. Mr. Klecker is absent. Mr. Spiker.
Present.
Present. Mr. Chimay, unknown at this point. Absent for now. Ms. Mazanowski, absent. Mr. Wazorek.
Here.
Present. And we have one of our alternates, Amanda, who is also present. So we do have a quorum to take action on any business. Okay. Next up on the agenda is the approval of the September 21, 2021 meeting minutes. We did not have an October meeting, hence the 2-month disparity there. Hopefully everybody had a chance to read through the minutes quickly. And is there any questions or comments, edits?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Motion and second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, minutes are approved. Next up, we have an update on the Fairmont Mcclellan Neighborhood Planning Initiative. I think Kathy and Aaron are going to speak to that. Aaron, I think, has a presentation. If Kathy, I think we can do a share screen. I'll turn the floor over to you.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
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 Okay. So Erin's going to do most of the talking and going to show you a story map that she's created for the Fairmont Mcclellan Neighborhood Strategic Planning Area. As you may recall, we've been doing these as we're able with the neighborhood planning areas that were identified as very refocused. This is the third planning area that we've worked on since taking office back in 2018. So the first one was the East Bayfront, Academy Marvintown was the second, and now we're working with the Eastside Grassroots Coalition, which is our stakeholder in that area on this plan. We were trying very hard to keep it fairly uniform to the Academy Marvintown plan, but what we found is there's so much going on in this neighborhood that we actually had to vary from our standard format. It's actually becoming a fairly complex and exciting plan, and we've worked really well with Gary Horton and Sister Michelle and the others with the Eastside Grassroots Coalition. Where we're at now is we've been working for the past year on the plan, and we're finalizing it with them. We presented it at a study session last week to the group, and so we're going to move forward with finalizing the plan over the next few weeks, and probably come back to you in January for adoption of the plan. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Erin. Erin, you should be able to share the screen.
Yep, I can do that. Okay, so this is just a little presentation and overview of what we've put together with our core group, our core stakeholders in the neighborhood, which are the Eastside Grassroots Coalition, and that includes the Quality of Life Learning Center and the House of Mercy in that neighborhood. So where we started with this planning initiative, as we do with our past initiatives as well, was to take a look at area focus and base our recommendations off of what was recommended for this area in area focus. So those things included things like proactive code enforcement, demolition of blighted homes, updating and beautifying commercial properties that are on Broad and Buffalo Street, providing financial incentive for home repairs, the beautification of Fairmont Parkway, and implementing the master plan at Mcclellan Park, which is already underway. And along with that, we also, this is a unique planning process, like Kathy was mentioning, because Eastside Grassroots Coalition had completed a organizational strategic plan in 2018 and had identified some kind of broad categories of things that they would like to see improved in the neighborhood and for their organization to work towards over the next couple of years. So we're kind of taking the recommendations from Area Refocused and coupling them with the recommendations that Eastside Grassroots Coalition has identified in their organizational plan. So some of those things overlap. So those are things like homeownership promotion, rehabilitation of homes, sidewalk improvements, the development of Savacchio Business Park. The group also has a very strong focus on fostering youth development. They have a youth employment program in the summer, among like other programs. They have an after-school program. They have a focus on improving health. They'd like to assume effective organizational governance, and improving their outreach and communication to residents, and then also attracting private and public investment in their neighborhood. So, like I said, our goal was to kind of combine these two things and create a path forward for the next 5 years for this area. So this is our planning area, goes from the Bayfront connector over to the city's edge on Bird Drive, and then from the Bayfront connector north to 12th Street. So it's a fairly large area. There's about 7,000 residents who live here, 2,500 households, homeownership rate of about 60%, and an average home sale of about $60,000, and a poverty rate of 35%. So where we started once we had those broad demographic indicators, like we did with Academy Marvintown and like we're doing in the rest of the city, we conducted a property condition survey in the neighborhood. So we collected a condition survey for every residential property in this area, and have identified some places to start with some of this information. And typically where we start are the unsound properties. So those are the ones that have been rated the worst of the worst. So we give each property a condition rating 1 to 5, 1 being the best and 5 being the worst. We identified about 34 unsound structures. Some of those are rentals, some of those are occupied. So those are going to pose additional complications as we start to move these properties towards blight. But those will definitely be the places that we start, and I've already started with our code enforcement office. This area is also unique is because they do have a lot of public housing north of Buffalo Road, adjacent to Roger Young Park. So and also scattered sites of public housing throughout the neighborhood as well. So that adds, I think, a stabilization effect to the neighborhood, stabilizing conditions, and provides, security and a lot of other benefits to having the housing authority there. So these are the 34 properties. And as we talked with our core group of Gary Horton, Sister Michelle Schreck, and others at the center, we identified this cluster of unsound properties in between what is Elm Street and the Bayfront. There's quite a few properties where we'd like to start seeing some improvement, and then properties that are along Buffalo Road. The group prioritized those out of the 34 as important places to start working with our code enforcement office. So along with the properties, we also identified some vacant lots. Not sure why those aren't loading. But we, as part of the survey, we're also looking for places that might have tall grass or weeds, or are dumping sites, or accumulating trash. So through that, I have identified about 6 places where there are overgrown grass and weeds. There might be some dumping happening. And we've passed those along to our code enforcement office and are starting to work with the property owners on getting some of those sites cleaned up as well. And we did a public meeting in May of this year, and did a survey along with that public meeting. And trash pickup and dumping sites are things that people wanted to see prioritized as part of the plan. And folks wanted to see that they identified it as a top need for the neighborhood. And because the group has such a focus on youth development, we wanted to build off of that. So we did a bit of a training program with the students in August, and went, because they're already employed and looking for things to do, we went and trained them on the uses of GIS, which is basically creating maps and mapping applications. So we trained them in what that is, what people use it for, how it works, just a broad overview, and then train them how to use an app called Survey 123, which is what we use to collect property conditions. And they catalog the number of gardens that are in their neighborhood. And this was identified by Mr. Horton as a priority project because the neighborhood is home to many refugees and immigrants who do a lot of extensive gardening. And you can see if you are driving through public housing near the center, so many people are growing things. So We worked with the students to compile that information and collect it. And we taught them to create web applications to be able to share their data. So here is one student's web app that they created as part of the project. So we focused between the area of Downing and Franklin, and the students categorized what type of garden they were looking at, whether it's a vegetable garden or a flower garden, and in total they identified 90 gardens altogether. So that was an exciting project, and just impressive just to see, the amount of things that are being grown in this small section of the neighborhood. And then our last two projects that we are going to be prioritizing as part of the plan. The first are park improvement projects that we've identified. And the first, next to this, the Quality of Life Learning Center there are 7 parcels of land that equal about an acre. If you know where McDaniel Run crosses under June Street and opens up there. I'm sorry, the pictures aren't loading here, but see if something will come up. So we're looking at working with the housing authority and residents to acquire these 7 parcels of land and turn it into a riparian buffer, kind of a passive park, at least in the beginning. The housing authority has agreed to be a partner in providing maintenance for the park. And you can see an example of the riparian buffer here at Cascade Creek. So this would be something that we would put in with the help of grant funding and our sustainability coordinator for the city. And I'm sorry the pictures aren't loading. I'm not sure why that is, but you can see in the smaller picture at least, there's a lot of open green space, and then the creek is where these trees are. It's currently surrounded by the trees. So we think that will hopefully help with any flooding issues, hopefully also help this McDaniel Run then goes down Franklin Avenue and empties into the lake directly. So hopefully this will help by filtering out those any hazardous materials or anything. And then our other park project is at Roger Young Park. And we had a meeting with some neighborhood residents and identified the need for a soccer field. There's many children in the neighborhood that are interested in playing soccer. And we think that this would be a good project to allow as many children as possible to be able to use the space. And along with this, we also identified this as a need for something called participatory budgeting and community-led park planning around the park. So this would be part of our American Rescue Plan funds. And we would engage with residents doing surveys and asking folks what they would like to see in the park. So Roger Young would be included in that participatory budgeting. And then our final projects are around priority corridors. So we've identified 5 priority corridors that we would like to see improved in the neighborhood. The first priority corridor is Buffalo Road, and we've identified residential facade improvements for the corridor, streetscape improvements for things like sidewalks and street trees, and then potential new development on vacant lots. Buffalo Road is an area that sees a high existence of vacant lots. There are, you can see in the maps on the right here, this is the property condition survey. So we would prioritize the yellow, which is average, and the orange, which is poor, for residential facade improvements along Buffalo Road. And then prioritizing the red parcels potentially for demolition. And then you can see these kind of green polka dotted areas. Those are vacant lots. So you can see there are quite a few connected areas where we see potential for new development. The next corridor is Fairmont Parkway. The conditions here compared to Buffalo Road are, you can see more light green and dark green properties, so that's good and excellent condition. But we still see room for improvement with those properties that are rated average and poor. So that's where we would prioritize residential improvements. And then streetscape along Fairmont Parkway. Things like tree trimming and sidewalk improvements would be among some of the basic improvements. And then we wanted to also include what was identified in Active Erie, which were for Fairmont Parkway, this included the bike lanes that would be added to the road. So the street would retain its on-street parking and would retain traffic moving in either direction and its median, and we would add a bike lane. Broad Street was our third priority corridor that we've identified. So we, for this area, this is not really a residential area. There's Perry Plaza on the west side of the street, and then a couple other businesses on the east. So we would prioritize commercial facade improvements for the businesses that are in that plaza. And then this area was also part of the east side connector pedestrian study that was completed at the end of last year. And this is a rendering from that study. And you can see that they, along with Active Erie, recommended a lane reduction on Broad and adding these bike lanes that you can see in the rendering. And then the final improvement for Broad Street was an intersection improvement at Buffalo Road and Broad, which is the intersection. It's a three-way stop. And the East Side Connector pedestrian study just recommended an additional study to be put into that intersection to improve pedestrian access in that area. And then our last two priority corridors is Downing, and this one again is just an Active Erie recommendation of the addition of bike lanes moving in either direction. And then Bird Drive, there was a recommendation in Active Erie for the addition of bike sharrows on the road, so that cyclists could use the same lanes as cars. So I think that there are a lot of exciting, pretty big projects for us coming out of this plan. And then neighbors seem like we're very receptive to all of these ideas. I know that they've been in constant communication with the leaders of Eastside Grassroots Coalition, so I don't think anything was too surprising to anybody. But I think exciting and exciting to be working with the city. So our next steps, we'll be working out the plan document itself. And as part of that, we'll be creating an action plan and progress tracking form like we did for Academy Marvintown. So this form is actually from the Academy Marvintown plan, but we'll include something similar to this in the Fairmont Mcclellan plan. So we'll include benchmarks for things like housing and property, infrastructure, community building, economic development, and crime and safety benchmarks. So between now and January, when we'll come back to present the full planning document to you, we'll be making those updates and then hopefully be back for your review in January, in your January meeting. And then we're hoping to have this before City Council for their review and adoption like we did with our last two plans in the February, March, so the spring of next year. But if anybody has any questions, I know that was a lot of information, but be happy to take any questions now.
I have a few regarding the parks. How does this relate to the plan that Kathy, that you guys had shown us like a year or two ago with the trying to create a park system and with some of the blighted properties? Was that baked into this, or was that overlap, or? I
Yeah.
was trying to find that plan. I
Oh,
couldn't
go
find
ahead,
it.
Erin.
Yeah, so this,
That's a good question. Go ahead, Erin.
yeah, it is further east than the area that we had identified in the East Bay front for that winding trail and blight reduction kind of plan. But I think the greening of this area, I mean, I think it will all, to me, it all feels connected. The
Yeah.
greening of, you know, as you move along Buffalo Road or Fairmont Parkway, I mean, the active Erie plan, I think it's all kind of connecting itself through that as well.
I feel like when you look on you could come up with a similar concept that would be equally as beneficial to this pocket. Just looking at a map that with Mcclellan, like if you could figure out a way to connect Mcclellan to the 18th effort, or to Roger Young somehow. But then just another kind of random question. I know this is out of your geography. On the other side of McClellan, when I'm on Google Earth, there's a big tract of green space kind of behind a Centra, and it's labeled on Google Earth. It's tagged as East Erie Nature Trail Park. Anyway, it caught my eye. But where I'm going with this is it feels like you've got a lot of options there to build upon this plan in the future. And then I guess those are more comments and observations. But then I guess one more specific question on the Mcclellan Park. You had mentioned early in your presentation of finishing that master plan. Is it finishing the whole master plan? Because I looked at that and there's a nature center baked into that.
Yeah, I'm not, Kathy, do you know the status of, I know the nature center is one piece of that that's is left undone, but I know like the dog park and the playground and the trail improvements are all part of that have been completed.
Yeah, I don't know the status of the nature center in McClellan. I haven't heard that it's progressing, so I'm not exactly sure. You make a good point though, Jason, about, you know, how do we start connecting these open space and park features and recreational spaces? The one thing that Fairmont McClellan has quite a bit of and helps with connectivity is all the active Erie improvement projects that at least connect them through sidewalk or bike lane. And that's contemplated throughout the city. It's just when we did the East Bay front, we didn't have that plan in place. So we didn't really have an opportunity to figure out where those connections could be that were more within right-of-ways and on the road. East Bay front is a little different because the concentrations of blight kind of lend itself to creating this new greenway system. But you bring up a good point. Is there an equally good opportunity through sort of these natural ecosystems to connect, at least from a sort of an environmental aspect? And there certainly could be, particularly in this area in Fairmont McClellan. So we'll take a look at that and see where there might be other opportunities to further that connection. In fact, Darren, I thought at the meeting that there was quite a bit of discussion of this McDaniel run, you know, extending. Where else can we create riparian buffers or potentially some active open space around McDaniel? I'm not saying that right, but you know, McDaniel run.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I think that's a good observation, Jason. We can look at that.
Yeah, I know these parks are more for the neighborhood over here, but occasionally my kids love going to that zip line at McClellan. I find we drive over there, and then when you're there, you kind of feel like you're on an island where you can't walk. There's no other parks to walk to once you're over there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so if Roger Young gets improved like it should, then it's so close to it on the map. Like how do we make those
Connection.
yeah, maybe it's the next iteration of this plan when it goes live and then he's revised in 10 years or something.
Yeah, no, I think it's certainly something we can tee up in this plan. We'll look at how the active Erie plan maybe provides a framework, but if we can do it through the natural environment, they do have some vacant lots that they're dealing with, but I'm not sure that they're completely laid out to sort of create a more natural connection. So it may be more of an on-road.
You got some
connection, but yeah, I
smaller
remember.
pockets like what I never even heard of Woodlawn Avenue Park, but that's looks like a legit park.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of tucked away
Yeah.
in the middle of a neighborhood, so.
Yeah, it's good work. I like the progress though.
Thank you. Anything else? Any other questions on this project? It's like I said, it sort of took a turn that we weren't expecting, but it was a pleasant turn. We're trying very hard to incorporate other studies and other recommendations from other studies into these plans, so you can kind of see the holistic approach to how does it all work together and how does it all fit, and making sure that those other recommendations continue to be considered and brought up and move forward for implementation. So, sorry, Amanda, you unmuted yourself. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I don't have a map in front of me, and I'm wondering what schools are in that neighborhood.
DL Elementary is the only public school.
Okay.
And then St. James is on Buffalo Road.
Oh, right. Yep. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I'm just kind of assuming that they're part of the East Side Grassroots Coalition, but perhaps that's not a good assumption.
I
That
don't
the
know
schools,
connections in the past, Kathy.
I don't know that they have a connection. The East Side Grassroots Coalition is very connected with the Housing Authority, though. The Housing Authority supports a lot of their work for the quality of life learning center.
Okay. Just thinking of Deal being a community school at this point, I'm assuming that's going to get tied in at some point, or is on the back burner working with Gary Horton. So, okay, interesting.
Yeah, we'll ask that, Aaron, at our next check-in to see what kind of connection they have with Deal.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Great work.
Any other? Thank you. Okay, Rich, I think that ends that item. Do you want us to kind of move on, or?
Yeah, you should. Please.
Okay.
Next up, up is the update of the ARP.
Yep. And before we do that, I want to introduce a new face to the Planning Commission. You'll be seeing him a lot more. It's not Andy Zimmerman. Everyone, I think, knows Andy on the call, but it's Chris Kinder. Chris Kinder is our brand new preservation planner. He started a few weeks ago. He will be working directly with the Historic Review Commission. Many of you remember the creation of that commission through the zoning ordinance. And we'll be working with you on a preservation plan once that gets up and running. So, Chris, if you want to say a few words while I get my screen share up and running and introduce yourself, that would be awesome.
Well, again, my name is Chris Kinder. Happy to be here. I've been here about a month. I've met several of you, I think, already. A few of you have not, but like Kathy said, we'll be working within the next few months to create a historic preservation plan for the city of Erie, a comprehensive 3-year plan. So looking forward to getting that started. And if you have any questions about the program, we're building it from the ground up. So if you have any questions about what's going on or what we're planning, feel free to reach out at any time.
There you go.
Welcome.
Thanks, Chris. All right, before I start, I have the weirdest thing. What can you see on my screen? Anything?
PowerPoint.
It looks like the PowerPoint, both
Okay.
main slide and the individual slide deck.
It
Yeah.
says goals of ARP on the slide.
Also the ARP. Yep.
All right, thank you. So you can still see that then. Okay.
Yep.
So there's been a lot of, I'm sure you've been watching, seeing, reading about the ARP programming and how we're coming up with funding ideas for it. But I wanted to give you just a quick overview. This is a presentation that we gave to the Council of Advisors. And as you may recall, the Council of Advisors is the group that the city is working with to really help not only explain the process, to get feedback. They're going to be sort of our litmus test as we move forward on the impact of the ARP programs that are funded. But they're also helping us form what sort of an equity framework looks like. And the Council of Advisors are representatives of all the advisory councils and important boards and commissions that reports to the mayor and his administration. It includes city council. It also includes representatives from those advisory councils and a representative from the planning commission. Your representative is Tony. She couldn't be on the call today, so I'm sort of filling in for her. She wouldn't have access to this PowerPoint anyway, so I'm giving you a probably a more in-depth look at what we're doing. This is the PowerPoint we gave, like I said, to the Council of Advisors. They've met once. They're going to meet again this week. And talk about a equity scorecard for the programs. So I just want to give you an overview of what the ARP, and this is a little bit more in depth than the framework that I shared with you a couple months ago when we were first sort of diving into this. Since that time, we have hired an ARP program manager. Her name's Jackie Spry, and she's really she's helping marshal through all of this. She's helping us keep on track with the Council of Advisors, getting information out as it becomes available, and getting things prepared for City Council for them to review it. After I go through kind of the lay of the land for ARP, I want to share with you some of the requests that have moved forward to City Council so you're aware of them, and then we can talk a little bit more about why those are moving forward at this time. Keep in mind that the interim guidance for the ARP was it was out for a couple of months. It closed July 16th. We've been expecting the final guidance on ARP in October, and it still has not been released. So at this point, we're still working from interim rules, but every other community across the nation is also working on interim rules. So just to go over this, the goals of the ARP, there's 4 goals that this all comes from the guidance, and it's to support COVID-19 response efforts, replace lost public sector revenue. As much as the ARP funding is to help with COVID recovery, it's equally to help local governments backfill some much needed funding for infrastructure. So it's not just tied to COVID relief. And that's a hard distinction for people to understand, but that it truly is. And that's why you see things like stormwater, water, and sewer as permissible expenses, also lost revenue. The support immediate economic stabilization, that's probably the one that's most top of mind for people, is we've lost a lot of groundwork in our economic development. Small businesses have been hurt because of the shutdowns and different requirements because of COVID requirements and mediation. So it's been really tough on our small businesses. And then of course the systemic public health threat from having to deal with the virus and the impact to our hospitals, our healthcare, and to our mental health, to be honest. So those are the 4 sort of goals of what the ARP is designed to do. There are these are the buckets that are allowable expenditures as defined in the ARP. And the one thing that's not listed here is public safety. Public safety was sort of an add-on by the Biden administration. But here you see public health, services to disproportionately impacted communities. We'll talk from now until the funding is expended a lot about that particular area of expense, because the reason that Erie received so much in ARP funding, we were the 3rd largest allocation in the state behind Pittsburgh, and that's because of it's not necessarily a good thing. It's because of that our population, we have a high population of people living in poverty and people who are sort of struggling to make ends meet. And that's the reason we received such a large allocation. So also to address COVID economic impact, replace lost revenue, and infrastructure investments. Like I said, the other piece of this is the public safety piece, which is something that the city is looking at. So just to kind of talk about how we focused on this, you see that there are these buckets. The addressing the COVID public health impact, we see, so that's a requirement, or that's an option for any municipality or county. Since the county has their own public or health department, we don't see that's really where the city needs to spend most of their funding. So these are really the 4 areas that we're focused on: disproportionately impacted communities, economic impact, replacing lost revenue. That's fiscally making sure that the city is fiscally responsible. We're not having to raise taxes to replace the lost revenue, and our infrastructure investments. Primarily, those are focused on stormwater right now, and we'll probably look to do that in the future. Why you see this the way it looks like, this was a presentation because we wanted to start talking about all the things that we're able to do with this funding because of that we're a community in distress. So things like walking trails, public space improvements, and parks. That is actually an eligible expense for the city of Erie because of the condition of our community. So this is just an area where we can't actually spend money on something like that. But one of the things that we have to keep in mind is it has to be in a qualified census tract, and I'll show you what that means, in order to have a lot more flexibility in how this funding is spent. So qualified census tracts are going to be top of mind as this funding flows because we have a lot, like I said, a lot of flexibility. As Aaron had mentioned in the previous presentation, we will be able to use some of this funding to improve our parks and our public spaces. So safe routes to schools, safe routes to parks, streetscapes, lighting, which is more of a safety issue, sidewalk replacement, and park development are eligible expenses as long as they're located within qualified census tracts. So I just wanted you to be mindful of that. Qualified census tracts are qualified because they have predominantly low-income citizens who live in high concentrations in them. So you will see when we talk about the housing plan for the redevelopment authority that's moving forward, that funding is all earmarked for qualified census tracts. So not only is your home, if you are a low-income household, is your home eligible for improvements, but the people around you and their homes will be eligible for improvements. So it'll have a high impact in a fairly defined area of the community. And then one of the reasons that we're so hyper focused on public spaces is one, it's something that the city can move the needle on. It's something that we hear a lot about when we're out there doing these neighborhood strategic plans. Is we want our public spaces to be safe. We want them to be walkable. We've all realized that we use the outdoors how meaningful they are to us during the pandemic and the shutdown, because those were our mental health walks. It's how we got to places if we needed to during the shutdown and when buses didn't move forward. So, and then there's also the lost revenue. We will be allocating funding for lost revenue, and so you'll hear more about that. But let's talk about qualified census tracts. So on the screen, those are the qualified census tracts identified in Erie in 2021. You can see it's over half of the population are located in qualified census tracts. At this point, other than infrastructure funding and funding for lost revenue, every other dollar that we're earmarking would go into either a business, a household, or public space within these qualified census tracts. You can see that there is a higher level of diversity within these tracts, 47%. These are not my terms. These are the terms that I pulled out of qualified census tracts. I don't know if white, non-white is the most PC term, but that's the term that I pulled off their website. And so there are a number of qualified census tracts in the city of Erie. This is 26th Street is sort of the southern boundary that you see here, and then it kind of meanders. So it's a good chunk of the city is within those. But you can also see in the second chart below, I had Aaron kind of pull what are the numbers, you know, what else, what other issues are happening within our qualified census tracts. You can see a very high percentage of our blighted property are there. So we will have a focus of funding on blighted property removal, blighted properties, mostly on housing. And we know that because of not only our blighted BPRC action, but also of our property conditions. Most of the lots that are owned by the redevelopment authority or the land bank, which have been taken through either eminent domain donation or through the tax sale, almost all of them are within qualified census tracts. Just really showing that the more money we can actually put to addressing those blighted properties, the bigger the impact in those areas of need. We have a higher percentage of rental properties there. We also have a great deal, more than half of our parks are located in qualified census tracts. And all of our organized neighborhood organizations, which isn't surprising, but I found it interesting, all of our qualified neighborhood organizations are located within qualified census tracts. So they're there to do the job that's needed to be done to help stabilize those neighborhoods. So it makes sense that that they are there as well, and that they are located there. So you'll see that happening, or you'll see a lot about qualified census tracts as we move forward. So there's a lot of things that can be done in QCTs. We have a lot more freedom to deploy this funding, and here's just a sample of the things that we're thinking of, that we're looking at in order to get this funding out the door and meet the needs of the community as we see them, and parks is one of it. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then I kind of want to just pivot real quick to, hold on, there we go. Another infograph that was created, just so you can kind of see what's been moving forward. Okay, do you see the ARP funding proposal with buckets, little buckets of money? That we see?
Yep.
Okay. What has moved forward already is to City Council for approval is we've had just over close to $5 million requested for stormwater. This doesn't show the stormwater. I'm just giving you a verbal update for stormwater needs. It was, I believe it was close to $900,000 for the fix. If everyone knows, Garrison Run failed a couple months ago, and Garrison Run failed underneath Frontier Lumber and a couple of homes over on Lower East Side off of East 5th Street. So the city had to go in and make emergency repairs because stormwater is an eligible expense. They did advance ARP funding to make those repairs and make the city whole. In addition, another $4.5 million was requested for capital needs for stormwater. And those are for the most near and immediate needs of stormwater infrastructure. So I don't have that map with me, but that's what's moved forward. In addition, just over $3 million was requested by the Erie County Redevelopment Authority for 3 major brownfield projects. And this is just a small portion of the funding they needed to clear those sites. One is the EMI property on 12th Street, so where the pedestrian bridge is. They will be demolishing a portion of that site, rehabbing the existing building, and they requested some funding to assist with that. Another site is the Quinn T property, which is at East 16th and French Street. You can't unsee that piece of property if you haven't seen it. It's pretty disastrous. The cleanup of that property is extensive. The County Redevelopment Authority acquired it, and they will be clearing that property completely. And our goal there is to turn it into a park. They don't see really redevelopment opportunities with that property. It would be too difficult to remediate it for residential purposes. So our goal is to actually create a park in its place. So we will eventually be asking for additional dollars from ARP to create a park on that property. But right now, it's just for clearance. And then additional funding for Savacchio Park, for the redevelopment of Savacchio Park for businesses in that park. That's also located, all three of those are in a qualified census tract. In addition, the two proposals are moving forward by the city. They are being considered by City Council at their meeting tomorrow night. This is one of the first ones. I'm not as knowledgeable about all these programs, but I just wanted to make you aware. It's about $20 million being requested that would flow through the Economic and Community Development Department of the city. There's 10 different programs that funding would flow through. It would backfill additional flagship and Commodore funds for small businesses, large-scale residential construction projects, so there would be a funding pool for that, small business technical assistance, so you can kind of read through all of these. The flagship and Commodore Fund and the Kiva Diversity Matching Loan Fund, those are existing programs, and so they're just adding additional dollars to those programs through ARP. There's a new small business diversity loan and grant program that will be created of $1 million. Then the small business technical assistance, that's actually reprogramming funding for businesses. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not the one. It's the restaurant entertainment industry relief. They're actually going to provide some additional relief for small businesses who are impacted, restaurants in the entertainment industry impacted by COVID. There's the urban core and anchor building redevelopment. That's a funding pool for small or for loan programs for gap financing for new or redevelopment opportunities in the downtown core. Business refinance and restructuring. A lot of businesses, just to get by during COVID, put a lot of their debt on credit cards. And so this is an opportunity for them to refinance that debt. Additional dollars for brownfield, for continued brownfield site redevelopment. There's not site projects yet, but that could include like things like Erie Coke, essentially things like Erie Mill and Press, those types of projects that are still out there that really need to be addressed. So there is funding for that. Community development initiatives, we get a lot of requests from nonprofits looking for funding for capital projects. So we're just going to have a bucket. Once this funding is approved, if it's approved at whatever level it's approved, then the department will define and refine the programs and how people can access them. So those applications and the way to access them do not exist yet, except for those programs that already exist, like Flagship, Commodore, and Kiva. So you'll hear more about those as they become available for businesses. And then the other request is the one I'm a little more familiar with, and that is the request by the city's redevelopment authority for $15 million for housing programs. This has been a concept that has been under development for almost a year now, working with our neighborhood groups to come up with a holistic housing program to meet the needs of really everyone on the spectrum of housing insecurity. There would be a requested $1.8 million in additional blight for blight removal and property disposition. So that would be funded through the redevelopment authority and the land bank, and that would be in addition to the money that they're able to get from the county land bank. There'd be more dollars for new housing production program. This would be more of a scattered site where we would have opportunities for 2 or 4 units on some of those lots. You saw them in Fairmont Mcclellan. There's lots of them in Trinity Park. So the redevelopment authority is unfortunately the proud owner of a lot of those. They just need some funding to actually spur some redevelopment on those lots. So that's what that means. A rental investment program. We are in desperate need of stabilizing our rental housing stock. And this would be a fund for landlords who are in good standing and need additional dollars to improve their properties, This would also be a good program for someone who wants to purchase a stacked flat. That's what I call them. So they live in one unit and rent out the other. Homeowner rehabilitation loan, there's going to be a lot of funding, and this will also be a forgivable loan for those who qualify. So this is for rehabilitation. The nice thing about this funding, if you're familiar with the housing funding that's usually accessible in the city, is that this does not come with HUD restrictions. So you don't have the high level of restrictions that comes with HUD funding. So we're able to do a lot more with this type of funding to help rehab homes, and also look at those who might not qualify for HUD because they make a little too much, but they're also not qualifying for traditional financing. So we're trying to also target the working poor. There will be a small pot of funding for a interim loan program for small and minority contractors. Those just entering the business. We know we need a lot more contractors in the market, and this will be a soft sort of safety net kind of loan program to where they have access to needed funds to work on projects and work on them on behalf of the redevelopment authority. Lots more funding for lead and healthy homes. So $3.18 million for lead abatement and healthy homes initiatives. That's completely grant funded. These are not loans. And then home ownership incentive programs to help with PMI and down payment assistance. It's one of the first times that we will have had that. And funding for preservation of our historic properties, historic small businesses, and a small loan that would accommodate that. You can see there's a lot here, but they wanted to make it impactful, compelling, and holistic. So those are the two major program proposals that are moving forward to City Council. There will be additional funding requested for public safety, and then hopefully in December, which will be here before we know it, we're going forward asking them for a line item for park and public space improvements and to help advance the plans that we brought for you, but have never had much money to implement. So apologize for all the talking. There was a lot to go over, but there was a lot to catch you up on. If you have questions, I'll try to answer them. The same with the redevelopment authority is the same situation with economic and community development. Once they have assurances that the city will allocate that money, they'll spend the next 2 or 3 months developing the programs, getting the applications ready, and the qualifications. So it's not ready for prime time yet, but it's getting close. But first they have to allocate the money so they know what they have to work with. So a lot, but that concludes the update on ARP. Any questions? All right. I lulled everyone to sleep. That's okay. More to come. Thank you,
No, there's a
Amanda.
lot of activity going on. It's
Mhm.
good to see.
You gotta keep it going. You gotta keep it going.
Yep.
I think we're done. Rich, if there's anything else, I don't know what else is on the agenda. Yeah.
No, it was public comment was next. So if anybody or any non-commission members who have a comment? I don't hear anything. Don't see anyone. Is there any other comment from commission members?
I just want to make a comment. You can see on the screen here, Amy Francis has joined us. She's our new zoning officer. I know she hasn't had an opportunity to meet with the planning commission members yet, but hopefully when we start having meetings in person again, I'll be able to do the intro in person. Amy started with us It's been on about a month now, I think.
That's correct.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Speaking of in-person meetings, we're going to go back to them. We had a couple this summer.
I mean, my understanding is that because of, it sounds like this was kind of temporary as far as the building sort of being kind of put into more conservative frame here for a couple weeks, but I think it's entirely possible that our December meeting would be back in person. I don't know that for sure, but I don't know, Kathy, whether you've heard anything additionally about that. And I mean, I think we can have the meetings in person, but it sounded like, they kind of wanted people to avoid that the past couple weeks here.
Yeah, you're right, Jake. We were taking a more cautious approach because of the issues. Of course, we lost 2 police officers, and it looks like both were lost due to COVID. And we had an uptick of COVID in City Hall with city staff. So we were anticipating that there might be another shutdown of City Hall. So that's why we went to virtual. Another issue we have with hybrids is it becomes a little challenging when we have information to share, and some people have Zoomed in and some people are in person. It's really hard to hear all the information. So we just thought, since we had so much to share screen, we thought it would be easier to do it this way. But we can certainly plan on December in person. It may, again, just be a little difficult to kind of share screens and let's hear everyone. Those hybrid meetings just don't seem to work very well these days.
Yeah, I certainly understand. It's just I get more out of the in-person meetings, listening to the conversation, than by the Zoom type. But you got to do what's most beneficial.
Yeah, but we can plan on that. Again, we were anticipating potentially a shutdown of City Hall, which didn't happen, but it was nice seeing everyone virtually, or at least most of you.
All right. If there's nothing else, somebody want to make a motion for adjournment?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, second.
Amanda, that's
I'll
you.
second.
Oh, is that me? Is that it?
Yeah.
Oh
You can get in
gosh,
the
I should
minutes.
take my chance while I have it. I'll second.
Yeah. All right. Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye.